Hello, hello, hello. Right, I'm just going to share this in Teams. If anybody makes any comments in the comment section, I cannot see you for a moment. Volare, whoa, gentare, whoa. Hello, hello. Sorry, I'm a few minutes early. I just thought I'd get going. It's just sitting, waiting for things. It's like, right. Well, I should be in Austria right now. Sad times with a few of you. But never mind, we are here together. Just a little word then in terms of this. We're going to look at the Hungarian Uprising today. Then we'll look at the consequences on Thursday and then have a go at a question on Friday. Now on Thursday, it will be a pre-recorded lesson because I am in school. So I'm going to record that today and then I will upload that to my YouTube channel and it'll go up when it's scheduled to go up. So I'll have that all ready for you. Okay, so the Hungarian Uprising, this is a lovely one to start our kind of one of our questions with. One, because it's the most straightforward. Two, I know this back to front because it was the question on Year 11 2 years ago's paper, obviously because we don't have a Year 11 paper this year. And it's really pretty straightforward for you in terms of how the events unfold. So last lesson we looked at the space race, the lesson before we looked at the arms race. So the competition is really, really high now between the two leaders, between Stalin and between Eisenhower at this point. Okay. Now we are going to start our story slightly before 1956. We're going to start it in 1953. And we are going to look at what happens, how the Hungarian Uprising gets set up, the events, and that's where I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it when the Soviets have invaded and a ceasefire is called. After that, I'm realising I'm using my hands a lot. After that, we will then look at the consequences on Thursday. Right, so I'm going to push you back just a touch on my makeshift tripod. And let's start then. So our story starts for this in 1953. 1953, on the 5th of March, Stalin suffers a brain aneurysm. So it's like kind of a stroke. Or it's something to do, I'm not actually sure what brain aneurysm is, but it's something to do with like the blood flow in your brain goes, or it goes too much. Anyway, Stalin suffers this brain aneurysm. I think it's actually on the 4th of March. And he is such a paranoid man, as we know from our previous lessons. He is so paranoid that he has purged, meaning he's got rid of all of the best doctors in Moscow, in the Soviet Union. I don't know why this has started now. There we go. And because of that, the doctors are too frightened to treat him, and he ends up having this slow, painful death. I'm laughing, it's not funny. A slow, painful death on the 5th of March, and he eventually dies. Everybody in the Soviet Union is absolutely devastated. Even to this day, people talk about Stalin and how amazing he was for the country and how he did loads of stuff. I think there was a poll about 10 years ago saying that if they could have any leader from their past be back, Russia voted for Stalin. So people were absolutely devastated by the fact that Stalin was dead. Now, it does take a full 2 years because there's a lot of infighting now to get another leader. Now, when for example, Theresa May stepped down, you had lots of different candidates from the Conservative Party put in their putting their names forward into the hat, and then they had to gather votes. Then once they did a round of voting, if they didn't get enough votes, they were chucked out, and so on and so forth, to end up becoming Boris Johnson being the leader of the Conservative Party. It's very civilized, and there's definitely a structured way of doing it. Whereas in America, if the president dies, so if Donald Trump was to be assassinated, no comment, he would then have his vice president take over in Mike Pence. So they've always got a leader ready to go. Doesn't happen in the Soviet Union. There's a lot of infighting, a lot of scrapping to get to be leader. To answer your question, I don't know who you are because your username is a bunch of letters. Did he have a good funeral? Yes, Stalin had a state funeral. It was a big occasion. They actually had an open casket for, I think it was about a week or so, where people in the Soviet Union could travel to go and see his body. Not for me. Yeah, so he had a very big funeral. In 1955, a guy called Nikita Khrushchev takes over. Okay, so Nikita Khrushchev. Now, Khrushchev is spelt with 3 H's. H. He takes over. He is a big bald guy, and he is very different to Stalin. The satellite states are very happy about Khrushchev coming to power because he's so different. He's got a different outlook. He's not as paranoid. He's willing to work things through, and he was a lot more chill, I suppose, is the idea. Now, what he does is he gives a secret speech in 1955. And this speech is to the Communist Party, and it's known as what we call the secret speech. It's not so secret, obviously, because we know about it. At this speech, Khrushchev brings in a specific policy that is really quite exciting to the Soviet Union and its satellite states. The policy is known as something called as de-Stalinization. Now, it literally means what it says on the tin. They are going to de-Stalinize their policies, their country, the leadership, i.e. they are going to be less paranoid. They are not going to purge their leaders, and it's going to be much more peaceful. It's going to have something called peaceful coexistence. Where Stalin had previously, this bun is too much today. Where Stalin had previously antagonized Truman, like with the Berlin airlift and the Berlin blockade and the Berlin airlift, Khrushchev was more about de-Stalinizing, removing Stalin's policies from the Soviet Union and having a peaceful coexistence with the USA and the West, meaning that they're not saying that they're going to be best buddies, like, yeah, best buddies, friends for life. They're not going to be like that. Khrushchev recognizes that, but it's more about how they are going to live alongside each other without trying to blow each other up. Hello, Fletcher. My TA has arrived. Meanwhile, in Hungary, so we've got a kind of a 2-strand story going on at the minute, happening at the same time, happening in the parallel. They are going to collide, but stay with me. Let's go for a blue. Oh, sorry. I need to get that, Bubba. Hang on. All right. All right. Please excuse me. My dog is crying at me. Oh. Right. So, meanwhile, in Hungary, from World War II, because obviously after World War II or during World War II, Hungary was taken over by the Nazis and they had been controlled by the Nazis. But after World War II, when Stalin does his salami tactics across Eastern Europe, they are ruled by a guy called Rákosi. It's spelled like Rakosi, but his actual, the way you pronounce it is Rákosi. Okay. Now, Rákosi was extremely unpopular in Hungary. Like, I can't tell you how unpopular he was. He was very brutal to his people. He was a complete Stalin fanboy, but he didn't quite have the charisma that Stalin had. Stalin had built up this cult almost of personality that he could do no wrong. So he could go and murder 20 million of his own people. But Stalin was so loved, it didn't matter that he was murdering 20 million of his own people. Rákosi, on the other hand, was unpopular from the start. He was brutal, he was unpopular, he was horrible to his people, and he was a complete Stalin fanboy. He wanted to run Hungary like Stalin was running the Soviet Union, and it just didn't work. What are you looking at? So, not liked at all. When then Khrushchev comes to power and talks about de-Stalinization, Rákosi is pooping his pants. He's like, whoa. Khrushchev, I am running my country based on the way that Stalin ran the Soviet Union. What are you doing? Can I ask you to sit here, please? Excuse me. Can you sit there, please? Amisha's farted. Excellent. Can you just sit there? Good boy. Right, so once the secret speech is released and in the world and de-Stalinization becomes a policy that is going to be enacted across the Soviet Union and the satellite states, the people of Hungary take to the streets of Budapest, which is their capital, along with other cities, but it's easy just to remember Budapest. Oh, hi Tom. I do question your username, it's weird. So they start protesting. They pull down Stalin's statue. They start ripping away at the communist flags and things. They really go in for protesting against the Soviet Union because they never wanted to be communist. As a way to kind of quieten them down, to kind of smooth over the situation, Khrushchev removes Rákosi from power and replaces him with a guy that's called Naj. Now, Naj is a lot more popular. People like him. So it's a really good move by Khrushchev. This is then where our story merges into one, and that's why I'm going to go for a purple. Fletch. When Naj then comes to power, he is seen as a good communist, as a loyal communist, but he has got some reforms that he wants to enact in Hungary. He wants to make things better for the people. Things are not going well under Rákosi. Obviously, there were protests. He was very unpopular. He now wants to make things better. Since World War I, they've been under rule that they don't want. At World War II, even, they've been under rule they don't want. So he now wants to make things a little bit better. So he makes some demands to Khrushchev with this whole de-Stalinization policy. He asks for some more freedoms for the people of Hungary. He wants freedom of speech. He wants freedom of press. He wants freedom of religion. He wants the ability to be able to travel, particularly to the West. They want to go there. So there's that whole, he wants a bit more freedom for the Hungarian people, which Khrushchev is willing to grant. Things are hunky-dory. Until Nash sort of goes one step too far in the eyes of Khrushchev. Now, if you remember a couple of lessons ago when we looked at NATO and the Warsaw Pact, NATO was an optional military alliance, i.e. if you were in the West, you could join NATO if you wanted to. It was a kind of, yep, you can join, you don't have to join, it's absolutely fine, don't worry about it. Whereas the Warsaw Pact was made up of 8 members and they had no choice in being part of it. It was something they were forced into by the Soviet Union and their rule. Well, when Nash comes in, he sees that he's able to get these freedoms up here, and then he's a bit like, well, let's see how far we can push him, and demands that he wants to leave the Warsaw Pact. Now, Khrushchev has a bit of a fit here. He is not impressed with Nash's suggestion. In fact, he is tamping, fuming, raging. How dare Nash take a liberty as that to try and leave the Warsaw Pact? And the thing that scares him the most is the fact that Hungary are going to cause what we call a domino effect. If you've ever watched it, I know lots of people have been doing it on TikTok and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram over lockdown, where they put loads of dominoes together. You hit one, boom, they all fall. Excuse me. And Khrushchev is scared of that domino effect, okay? He thinks if he allows Hungary to leave the Warsaw Pact, the other 7 members, well, the Soviet Union are one, the other 6 members of the Warsaw Pact will leave and they won't have this military alliance. So he cannot have that. That is a big no-no. Sorry, pups. You and those ears. I'm sure it's the 6th of November. In fact, I'd put money at being on the 6th of November. And I would lose my money because it's the 4th. Okay, so Khrushchev has got his knickers in a knot because of leaving the Warsaw Pact. So what does he do? Because of Nash's actions, on the 4th of November 1956, so we're still in 1956 here. I should actually write 1956. Write it here. There we go. It's all written for you. Khrushchev sends in 6,000 Soviet tanks and 200,000 Soviet troops to go and sort out Hungary, to quiet down the protests, to quiet down the unrest, to show them who is boss. He is not happy with Nash. He also sends them in to go and get Nash and remove him from power. And it is all about sort of getting Hungary to fall back in line. They started to raise their head a little bit above the water, and the job of Khrushchev with the troops is to do this. Thanks, Fletch. Good boy. Is to push their head back down under the water and make sure that they are back in line. Now, Britain and France are watching, and they've got their own issues because they are trying to invade this, get the Suez Canal, so they can't help Hungary. Hungary are desperate, okay? The Hungarian rebels They use guerrilla tactics. Now, when I say guerrilla tactics, I'm not talking guerrilla tactics. I'm talking this spelling of guerrilla, meaning unconventional war tactics. Not like in the World War One, you know, with the trenches, they were conventional war tactics. Basically, being a bit dirty in terms of what tactics you use. So they use something called Molotov cocktails, which is like petrol bombs. They would attack lone tanks, they'd set them on fire, anything that they could physically do to prevent the Soviets from marching towards Budapest and basically seizing back control. Okay. They tried to communicate with the West via radio. They sent out lots of help signals, but nothing, unfortunately, was ever received. And if they were ignored. That then meant that eventually, 6 days later, that's where I've got my 6 from. A ceasefire is agreed. So on the 10th of November, a ceasefire is agreed. Now, although the ceasefire is in place from the 10th of November, sporadic fighting does happen until 1957, and it is all over by 1957. All right, kind of the middle. So we're talking about April, May, June time. Fighting officially finishes. That's where we're actually going to leave it today, because on Thursday, my lesson will talk about the consequences of the invasion. So after the 10th of November and the ceasefire, that is where we're going to leave it today. What I'd like you to do is, excuse me, Fletcher, good boy. I've put a lot of background information on, here we go, on the introduction there for you. Please excuse my cracked screen. Make sure you go through that. It is all of this top bit here. All right, just in briefer terms. What I then want you to do is use the gap fill on page 2 and the words that I've put there, please, to complete the story. It does go a little bit further than where I've gone today. Yeah, just a tiny, tiny bit further. And then there is a clip attached there. I want you to watch that and make notes in the following 4 boxes, please, about the Hungarian Uprising. All right. So you can type this up, you can write it down, I don't mind how, and then submit it via Teams, please. Like I said, there will be a pre-recorded lesson on Thursday, but a live lesson on Friday. I hope you had a good weekend. Just to let you know, I have recently, whether you think this is sad or not, I have recently set up a TikTok for school for you, where I'm going to put little tidbits on there for you of little exam tips. So let me just find that and do a little bit of a plug. It's Miss B Martin on TikTok. If you want to follow me, I am going to start creating new content on there as of this afternoon, hopefully. Just some little exam tips to help you, because I know that you're all on TikTok and not doing your work. So there you go. Otherwise, have a good day. See you on Friday for a live lesson, but see you on Thursday for a lesson anyway. Bye.